Alex here with a video on debtors' prisons. It's actually a myth. That's why I put a question mark at the end of the title. We don't have these in the US, and that includes family court. What's the word? I don't want to say in practice because that's the opposite. Officially, we don't have them. The way that the law set up, there's no debtors' prison concept in America today. But in practice, this might be happening to a lot of people because they don't really know how to deal with the issue. And you combine that with incompetence in family court, so judges making mistakes, and then, of course, the litigants' inaccessibility or the litigants' inability to get to an appellate court to fix the problem. So people without lawyers who are too poor, combined with judges who make mistakes, and finally with the inability to reach the Supreme Court to get a correction. Those three things sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, combine together, conspire together to put somebody in that situation where they've been ordered to pay a certain amount of money, they can't pay it, so they go to jail. And that's really all I have to say with why it's happening. It's not really legal reasons why it's happening. It's just too poor, no lawyer, judge makes a mistake, and you don't know how to appeal. Those things all lump together to cause the problem. So how does the system actually work and deal with this issue? Child support is supposed to be based on a person's income. It's a percentage of the person's income. And I guess they sort of assume that if you can't afford it, then you need to cut out your other expenses. So say you make $1,000, they're supposed to order you to pay around $200 in child support. If for some reason you didn't have that money available every month, they expect you to cut costs and deal with it. How can this turn into a problem? Well, a judge abuses their discretion and sets child support too high, which doesn't usually occur, unless they screw up on the deviations, which does sometimes occur. There are deviations that a judge can use to raise the child support above the formulaic amount. And sometimes if they abuse their discretion there, they apply too many deviations and spike your child support. Also, more often than not, it combines with other issues. So alimony, you add that in there, and now a person's paying 40-50% of their income. Or sometimes child support and alimony from other cases that the judge in this case isn't looking at. Those are pretty common reasons. But the most common reason, 100% for sure, most common reason is a person is making a certain amount of money, and then for whatever reason, they lose their job, they get demoted. For whatever reason, they suddenly start making a whole lot less money. But the child support doesn't automatically go down. This is the most common reason people feel trapped. They end up going to court. They say, hey, I make $10,000. Okay, your child support is $2,000 a month. All of a sudden, they lose their job. They're not able to make that income anymore. Now they're making $4,000 and their child support is still set at $2,000. So oftentimes, people don't know that they can change it, or they feel like they can't afford an attorney, especially now that they're way less, they're poorer. They lost a whole bunch of money because their income went down. So they feel stuck. They don't know how to get to the court. They don't know how to change their child support. So they're stuck with that amount. They don't know what to do. Sometimes they will file a motion to modify child support, improper person representing themselves. In other words, they do know what to do. They go to court, they file it, and then the other side gets a lawyer and they say, wait, hold on. They're making less money, but they could make more. So let's impute their income to $10,000 anyway. That is a huge opportunity for an abuse of discretion, especially if the person going to court to modify doesn't have an attorney and the other person does. So that's another way that it happens. And sometimes there isn't even a change. Sometimes a person just never made that much money. They just never have because of their habits, because, I don't know, they just weren't achieving the type of person that achieves. They always worked in fast food, or maybe they only work 20 hours a week, and just right out of the gate, they go to court, poor, no lawyer, the other side gets a lawyer, and the first thing the other lawyer says is impute the income. So in these situations, you end up with somebody who has their income set at a very high amount, even though it's not supposed to be there, or it was set at a higher amount and their income went down and they don't know how to change it, or the judge is refusing to change it, and now they cannot afford to pay child support. What comes next? Contempt of court. Typically, the person with the attorney, usually it's the person with the attorney that does this. They file a motion to hold you in contempt of court, throw you in jail for not making the money. This is another huge area of confusion with a whole bunch of family court judges. They see a valid court order and they say, you're supposed to pay child support to raise your kid. You obviously don't care about your kid. You're going to jail until you start to care about your kid. The problem is that under contempt of court principles, somebody who's not complying with a court order that you're going to deal with punitively is supposed to be in non-compliance for reasons outside their control, and that's where things get dicey. A lot of judges will say, hold on, you should be able to get a better job. We don't understand why you can't. Or they'll say, yeah, you're not able to get a better job, but you haven't proved why. Where are your applications? Sometimes the person who's going to court to represent themselves because they're too poor to get a lawyer doesn't know how to present their case. They don't know how to bring in evidence to show that they've been trying to get better jobs, or for whatever reason, they just aren't aware of how the trial process works. So what happens is there's a judge sitting on the bench, and then there's an order that says they're supposed to pay a certain amount of money, and the other side is raising this affirmative defense, which is what it amounts to, that, yeah, I'm not paying that amount of money, but it's not on purpose. I just don't know how to make that much money. And they just don't know how to prove that affirmative defense. That's what's going on. The other side that's accusing the person of not paying any money only has to show that there's a court order and that it's not being followed. That's all they have to show. When the person who's supposed to pay child support goes into court and admits they're violating the court order, but says they're only violating it because they can't help it, that it's not on purpose, that it's inadvertent, that it's out of their control, that burden is on them. And that's in case law in Nevada. And they just don't know that, and they don't prove it. And so they end up thrown in jail. And some judges are getting better about dealing with this, but most of them, especially in other states, aren't. They just have this attitude that you're supposed to pay all this money. You're not paying all this money for your kid. You're a bad person. Go to jail. The appellate courts don't see it that way. They will overturn if the person defends themselves, preserves the record, and, here's the hard part, files an appeal and or writ petition, depending on which one is required. It is complicated with contempt orders. It's not that simple. There's case law on that too in Nevada, talking about how they have decided that you can't appeal a contempt order and that you have to file a writ petition, but it's not 100% simple because how they deal with it post-judgment may be different from how they deal with it if the actual case is still going and there's no final judgment entered in the case. So more research for the non-attorney to do. This is how people end up in debtors' prisons in practice, even though the law isn't set up that way. So ultimately, you have the contempt of court issue that abusive discretions are occurring on. In other words, the judge is sort of de facto imposing a debtor's prison sort of situation for a parent, even though the law says that they're not supposed to do that, and the person doesn't know how to challenge the judge and have their decision vacated. Or sometimes you can even fight it at the imputation level, at the imputation step. So there will be a child support order itself before you even get to contempt, where the judge is deciding how much to set child support at, and they impute income. That's appealable too, though that's a little bit trickier now because they changed the rules. Back when I was in representing myself from 2008 to 2014, there was the Miniar case, which made it a lot easier to challenge these orders. A lot easier. Now I think they just opened up the discretion even more, which makes it a lot trickier to deal with this problem. And I don't know why they did that. It's a bad idea. Anytime you're getting into a situation where you're telling a person that they should be making a certain amount of money, but they aren't making that amount of money, you're playing with fire, because you're already starting out setting a person's child support at an amount that they are not making. It's a dangerous move for not only the court, but for the ex to try and do that. And there have been some videos out on YouTube of judges that scream at the person seeking child support. I don't remember what state it was in, but the judge was so furious with the mother in that case for doing that. She actually got the father jailed, and then he lost his job. And so the judge actually screamed at the mom and then lowered the dad's child support to the minimum. So this is a situation that some judges understand, but many judges don't. The problem that I'm hearing that it's coming mostly from states that are heavily religious, that there's just a different perspective in the religious states, that they just have this feeling that the person just has to pay child support, and if they can't afford it, then the problem is solved by throwing them in a cell for a while. I don't know what else to tell you guys about this topic, because it is a serious topic and it happens all the time. And I mean, the biggest problem is, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, is that people don't know how to change their child support. People don't know how to fight an imputation of income ruling. People don't know how to fight a contempt of court ruling. People don't know how any of the case law works, and they end up trapped in a situation that's not actually how the legal system was set up. And then, of course, you combine that with poor resources for the legal aid services in those counties. And the problem is just exacerbated in those counties because the person who needs help can't get an attorney and they just don't know what to do. So mainly, it's a combination of ignorance on the litigant's part, incompetence on the judiciary's part, and um, of course, yeah, you need to have the litigant on the other side that's really pushing that. I don't know if welfare agencies push it. I don't think that they do. I think it's usually the parent that's expected to receive child support. I might be wrong about that though. If you guys have any experiences with an abuse of discretion on a child support order, especially if you have experience on an abuse of discretion on imputation of income and or contempt of court. I'm really hoping to find somebody who has been held in contempt of court for not paying child support and they actually fought it and won. That would be awesome to have an interview with that person. A pretty vindicating experience, I imagine. And yeah, post that down in the comments below. Let me know. And if you guys also have any other myths, I hate to call this a myth because it's a reality for so many people. De jure, it's a myth. De facto, it may not be. If you have any other myths that you guys want me to talk about, post them down in the comments below, and I may do a video on those as well. And see you guys next time. And of course, Happy New Year.